Picture this. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that practically begged for grilling. The backyard smelled like hickory wood and sizzling burgers. My family and I were setting up lawn chairs, kids laughing, neighbors waving from across the street. It was the kind of wholesome scene you'd expect in a picture-perfect suburban neighborhood. But as the smoke curled upward from my barbecue, so did the trouble. Because from across the street, Karen was watching. Now, every neighborhood has a Karen. You know the type? Clipboard in hand, convinced she's the guardian of the homeowners association, self-appointed ruler of the block. For months, she had been nitpicking at the smallest things. My grass wasn't uniform enough. My garden hose wasn't coiled to HOA standards. And once, she even complained about my mailbox color being too cheery. But this time, she found her ultimate battleground. My barbecue. It started with a glare. You could practically feel the heat of her disapproval before the flames even touched the grill. Then, as soon as the first puff of wood smoke drifted toward the sidewalk, she marched over, lips pursed so tight they practically disappeared. "Excuse me," she snapped, hands on hips. "Do you realize your smoke is violating HOA air quality standards?" I blinked at her. HOA air quality standards? Was this a neighborhood cookout or the Environmental Protection Agency? I tried to laugh it off, but she was dead serious. Karen went on about toxic particles, nuisance smoke, and how she was going to report me to the HOA board immediately. She even pulled out her phone, snapping pictures like she was gathering evidence for a courtroom drama. The neighbors across the street, already sniffing the smoky air and hoping for an invitation, looked stunned. One even called out, "Karen, it's just a barbecue. You want a burger?" That only fueled her fury. But here's the thing. In trying to shut me down, she accidentally lit a fire she couldn't control. Word spread fast. First, one neighbor wandered over, plate in hand. Then another family came by, kids chasing each other in the yard. Before I knew it, the backyard was filling up. People weren't coming for me. They were coming to stand against Karen. She crossed her arms, steam practically shooting from her ears. This isn't a block party. It's a violation. But as more people showed up, bringing snacks, chairs, and laughter, it was starting to look exactly like a block party. And if there's one thing Karen hated more than smoke, it was losing control. And trust me, this was only the beginning of the showdown. By the time the burgers hit the grill, the crowd in my backyard had doubled. Music was playing, kids were running around with popsicles, and the smell of smoked brisket carried down the street. What started as a simple cookout was quickly transforming into a full-on neighborhood gathering. And right in the middle of it all stood Karen, red-faced, fuming and clutching her phone like it was a weapon. "This isn't going to last," she hissed, pointing her finger at me like a prosecutor in court. "I've already contacted the HOA president. You're going to regret this." Now, anyone else might have been nervous. But here's the truth. I'd read our HOA rule book cover to cover after her last complaint about my garden lights. And nowhere, absolutely nowhere, did it say anything about backyard smoke. The only line vaguely close mentioned open fires. But that was clearly about fire pits, not a propane grill or a smoker. Still, Karen was determined to twist those words into her personal vendetta. Within the hour, her reinforcements arrived. The HOA president, Mr. Dalton, pulled up in his beige sedan, wearing his usual khaki pants and expression of permanent disapproval. He was followed by two board members, both carrying notepads as if they were coming to audit my entire property. Karen strutted toward them like she had just summoned the cavalry. "There!" she cried, pointing dramatically at my grill. "Illegal smoke! A clear violation of HOA rules. Shut this down immediately!" The crowd quieted a little, curious to see what would happen. Even the kids paused mid-game, popsicles dripping down their hands. Everyone knew the HOA could be strict, but nobody had ever seen them go head-to-head with a backyard barbecue. Mr. Dalton adjusted his glasses and walked over, sniffing the air. "Smells good," he muttered, almost against his will. Then, clearing his throat, he added, "But Karen has raised a complaint. We'll need to determine if this violates our community regulations." The neighbors immediately rallied. One woman raised her hand. "Are you serious? It's just dinner. We've all grilled before." Another man chimed in, "If this is against the rules, half the neighborhood's guilty." Karen shot them all a glare that could cut glass. "It's about standards," she barked. "If we allow this, what's next? Giant bonfires? Smog filling our homes?" But instead of backing her, more people joined the pushback. They reminded Mr. Dalton of their own cookouts, of neighborhood potlucks, of 4th of July celebrations filled with sparklers and smoke. Bit by bit it became clear. Karen wasn't protecting the rules. She was just trying to control everyone else. And as the crowd grew louder, one thing was obvious. This fight wasn't going her way. Karen wasn't used to losing ground. The more the neighbors pushed back, the tighter she clung to her crusade. Her voice rose above the chatter, sharp and shrill, cutting through the festive mood. "If you all don't care about the rules, then I'll bring in someone who does," she snapped, waving her phone again. "This isn't over. I'm calling the authorities." The crowd gasped. Authorities? Over a barbecue? A few people chuckled nervously, thinking she was bluffing, but the look on Karen's face said otherwise. She jabbed at her screen, pacing dramatically on the sidewalk, while narrating into the phone, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, I'd like to report a violation. Excessive smoke. Potentially hazardous. Yes, immediate attention." By now, the mood had shifted from irritation to disbelief. One of the dads whispered, "What's next? She'll call the fire department if someone lights a birthday candle." The joke rippled through the crowd, but Karen didn't even blink. She was dead set on making this into a war. Mr. Dalton, still standing awkwardly by the grill, looked torn. "Karen, perhaps we should—" She cut him off. "No! If the HOA doesn't enforce standards, then the city will. This smoke is a nuisance, and I won't stand for it." The neighbors groaned in unison, some rolling their eyes, others shaking their heads. One mom muttered, "Honestly, she should be worrying about her own yard. I can smell her fertilizer from 3 blocks away." That earned a round of stifled laughs. Meanwhile, my grill kept sizzling. I flipped another round of burgers, deciding that if Karen wanted a show, I'd give her one worth watching. The smell of barbecue filled the air stronger than ever, and people began clapping like it was some kind of performance. Someone even yelled, "Encore!" Karen, however, wasn't amused. She kept glancing down the street, clearly waiting for her backup to arrive. And then, as if on cue, we heard it. The low rumble of a city vehicle pulling up. A white pickup truck with the words, "Code Enforcement" stenciled on the side, rolled to a stop in front of my house. Out stepped an officer in a crisp uniform, clipboard in hand. The crowd grew silent, all eyes fixed on him. This was it, the moment Karen had been waiting for. She rushed toward him like a lawyer meeting her star witness. "Officer! Thank goodness you're here. This man is filling the entire neighborhood with hazardous smoke. It's a violation of HOA rules and probably city ordinances, too. Shut this down immediately!" The officer raised an eyebrow, then slowly turned his gaze toward my grill, toward the crowd, and then back at Karen. The officer stood there for a long moment, clipboard resting against his chest as he surveyed the scene. The smoky aroma of grilled burgers and brisket drifted toward him, and I swear I saw the corners of his mouth twitch like he was fighting off a smile. Karen, meanwhile, hovered at his elbow, practically bouncing with impatience. "You see it, don't you?" she pressed. "All this smoke. It's a public nuisance. He's endangering the air quality of the entire block." The officer cleared his throat and finally spoke. "Ma'am, let me just get this straight. You called code enforcement because your neighbor is barbecuing," Karen gasped, as if insulted. "It's not just barbecuing. It's reckless. It's filling the neighborhood with smoke. This is a violation of HOA rules." The officer tapped his pen against the clipboard. "Ma'am, HOA rules aren't city laws. I enforce ordinances, not neighborhood disagreements." A wave of laughter rolled through the crowd. Neighbors were nudging each other, grinning ear to ear. Karen's face flushed crimson. But surely there must be some regulation. He can't just pollute the air like this. Pollute? One neighbor chuckled. That's mesquite wood, Karen. That's flavor. The officer turned to me. Sir, do you have an open fire pit here? No, sir, I said calmly. Just a smoker and a propane grill. He nodded. All right, then. As far as city regulations go, you're well within your rights. Backyard barbecues are perfectly legal. The crowd erupted in cheers, clapping and hollering like we'd just won a championship game. Someone yelled, "Case closed," and the kids started chanting, BBQ, BBQ, BBQ. Karen's jaw dropped. You can't be serious, she cried, turning back to the officer. You're just going to ignore this? All this chaos? She waved her hand at the crowd, who at that moment looked like the most cheerful block party ever assembled. The officer gave her a patient look. Ma'am, what I see is a community gathering and a legal barbecue. Unless someone's in danger, there's nothing to shut down here. And then, this was the kicker, he added with a grin, though I will need to conduct a thorough inspection of those burgers for quality control purposes. The backyard exploded with laughter. A few neighbors offered him a plate and he happily accepted, jotting something playful onto his clipboard like it was official business. Karen looked like she might actually combust. Her carefully orchestrated takedown had just blown up in her face. And instead of shutting me down, the whole town seemed to be siding against her. And the truth? We weren't finished yet. By the time the officer bit into his burger, the block had erupted into celebration. People were laughing, kids were darting between lawn chairs, and the smell of barbecue hung heavy in the air like a victory flag. The officer gave a dramatic nod after his first bite. Delicious, he declared. No violations here. The crowd roared with cheers. It wasn't just about burgers anymore. It was about standing up to Karen's endless attempts to control the neighborhood. Karen, however, wasn't ready to give up. She stomped her foot like a frustrated child. This is outrageous. You're all breaking the rules, and one day you'll regret it. Her voice cracked with fury, but the more she shouted, the less anyone cared. That's when something unexpected happened. My neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, an older woman, who usually kept to herself, stood up from her lawn chair and raised her voice. Enough, Karen. We're tired of it. Every week it's something new with you. Garden lights, mailboxes, lawns, now smoke. We live here too, and we deserve to enjoy it. Her words hit like a spark in dry grass. Others chimed in. Yeah, we're sick of the nitpicking, one man shouted. We're neighbors, not your subjects, another added. Even Mr. Dalton, the HOA president, shifted uncomfortably. He adjusted his glasses and sighed. Karen, perhaps we've been too strict lately. Maybe it's time we revisit some of these so-called violations. The gasp that escaped Karen's lips was almost theatrical. You're betraying me, she sputtered. But it was too late. The tide had turned. The neighborhood had found its voice, and it was united. Someone cranked up the music. A few families brought out extra dishes from their kitchens. Salads, chips, lemonade. What had started as a small backyard, barbecue had transformed into the biggest block party the town had ever seen. The officer hung around, chatting and laughing with the neighbors, his earlier inspection becoming the running joke of the night. Plates were passed around. Stories were shared, and for once, everyone seemed closer than ever. Karen, red-faced and defeated, retreated to her porch across the street, watching as the party she tried to shut down grew bigger, louder, and happier. For once, she wasn't the center of attention, and she hated it. As I stood at the grill, flipping another round of burgers, I looked around at the smiling faces and realized something important. Karen's attempt to divide us had actually brought us together. The whole town showed up. Not for me, not for the food, but to remind her that community means more than control. And that, in the end, was the sweetest victory of all.